Hello, I'm Richard Seltzer. I'd like to share with you one of my favorite stories, which I wrote 50 years ago. A good friend of mine was teaching an elementary school class in Brockton, Massachusetts. She told me so much about the kids in her class that I felt I knew them, and I started writing stories for her to read to them. This story was written for Julie and mentioned everyone else in the class. Leroy and Mary Jane and James and Ricky and Raymond and Michael and David and Penny and Frank and Desiree and Chuck. Once I got the idea that Julie was a little princess who wanted to be rescued by Prince Charming, the story wrote itself. I finished it in about half an hour. I love it, and I hope you will too. Julie's book, The Little Princess. Long ago, there was a castle with towers taller than church steeples, with stairs that wound round and around 1,000 steps high. And at the top of one of those towers lived a little princess named Julie. She had everything that a little princess could want: a crib, a warm blanket, 1,000 steps to run up and down, and a mommy, a daddy, and 1,000 playmates. Every night, her mother would tell her stories about witches and wicked stepmothers and fair damsels, and Prince Charming who always came to rescue them. But the princess wasn't a very happy princess. She wanted to be Rapunzel, or Cinderella, or Snow White, or Sleeping Beauty. She wanted a wicked stepmother and a Prince Charming to rescue her. Her mother loved her dearly and did everything to make the little princess happy. But the harder her mother tried to please her, the sadder the little princess became. All the lucky little princesses, the ones that people told stories about, had wicked stepmothers, and Prince Charming rescued them and fell in love with them. And here she was, a plain, ordinary princess, with a mother who loved her, and she was never miserable, and nobody ever treated her badly, and Prince Charming would never come to rescue her. Prince Leroy and Princess Mary Jane and Prince James and Prince Ricky and Prince Raymond and Prince Michael and Prince David and Prince Penny and Prince Frank and Princess Desiree and Prince Chuck and all the princes and princesses for miles and miles around wanted to play with Princess Julie. But she didn't want to play with anybody. She shut herself up in the tower, top of the tower, and she wouldn't let her mommy tell her stories, and she wouldn't even curl up in her crib with her blanket. She just sat on the stone ledge by her window and watched and waited. She'd make herself the most miserable little princess in the whole world, and Prince Charming would come galloping up on his white charger and carry her off to Never Never Land. Since the little princess wouldn't come down to the courtyard to play, her mother sent playmates up to the top of the tower. But soon all the princes and princesses got tired of just sitting on the top of the tower and watching Princess Julie wait for Prince Charming, all except Prince Chuck. Chuck liked to talk to the little princess. "You mean you know how to make Prince Charming come to rescue you? I always wanted to meet Prince Charming. I always wanted to find out where he got that white charger and shiny armor and how he finds fair damsels to rescue. And maybe if I wait here with you and Prince Charming comes to rescue you, he'll tell me where I can find a fair damsel and to rescue and who'll fall in love with me and live happily ever after." Then one morning, just after the milkman and the breadman, Prince Charming arrived. The little princess was so excited she didn't know what to say or do, so Chuck did the talking. "Hello, Prince Charming. Where'd you get that white charger and that shiny armor?" "Jordan Marsh. They were on sale. Just $10.98, regularly $15.45. So Chuck ran off to Jordan Marsh to buy a white charger and shiny armor, and Prince Charming rode off to Never Never Land with Princess Julie. The next day, Chuck rode all up and down Everydayland, showing off his white charger and his shiny armor. But the armor was a bit tight and very heavy, and his bottom was sore from riding all day. Besides, he'd forgotten to ask how to find fair damsels in distress, and after all, there was no reason to go riding around with shiny armor and a white charger unless you had a fair damsel to rescue. Then an old hag with one magic eye drove up Main Street in a VW. She stopped next to Chuck and told him, "Sonny, if you're looking for fair damsels, and I don't know what else you'd be doing in that get-up, there are hundreds of them in Never Never Land at Prince Charming's castle." Suddenly, it occurred to Chuck that Prince Charming had been rescuing damsels for years and years and taking them to Never Never Land. If he were a nice prince, he would have rescued only one damsel or two or three, but he had rescued hundreds and hundreds. What could he want with hundreds and hundreds of damsels? Unless he was an ogre or something. After all, how many kids can a guy play with at a time? So Chuck galloped off to Never Never Land, galloped right up to the gate of Prince Charming's castle. Prince Charming walked out in his pajamas. He looked very, very tired. But Chuck showed no mercy. He said, "Prince Charming, I demand that you free Princess Julie this very instant." Suddenly, Prince Charming looked very, very happy. "Ha! Why don't you take the rest of them, too? This is a terrible job rescuing damsels all the time. But the worst of it is that they just sit there in my castle and jabber away with each other and play dolls and things. I'm not as young as I used to be. I just can't take it anymore. In all these years, you're the first guy who ever asked for one of them back. Please take her. You're welcome to her and to as many others as you want." But Chuck only wanted Princess Julie. He picked her up, put her in his white charger, and rode off with her back to Everyday Land. Chuck was very, very happy because he had rescued a fair damsel. He told everybody all about it, time and again. But the little princess was very, very sad because she missed all the friends and dolls and things at Prince Charming's castle. And she was very, very mad at Chuck for taking her away from all that. Ever after that, she did everything she could to make herself the most miserable little princess in the whole world. So Prince Charming would rescue her again and carry her off again to Never Never Land. But in spite of everything she did to make herself miserable, she lived happily ever after. Now, before I finish, I'd just like to show you some of the silly pictures that I drew for this story. That's Princess Julie looking at her from behind. And, okay, here's a step colored up and down. Over here, here's a stepmother, colored wicked. Here's a tear, color it never. And here's a map of Everyday Land and Never Never Land with all of the castles of the princes and princesses marked. And here's Prince Chuck in his outfit. Color the helmet bright and shiny. Here's a bottom, color it soar. Here's Prince Charming's castle, color it Never Never. Here's Prince Charming's pajamas, color them tired and wrinkled. I think we got one more. Yeah. And here's Princess Julie again, color happily ever after. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in comments and I'll do more of the same. You can find my books at Amazon. My name is Richard Seltzer, as in Alka-Seltzer. My most recent books are Parallel Lives, Beyond the Fourth Door, and Nevermind. They can be read in any order. They're independent stories with overlapping theme and styles. Each presents a different view of reality, a different way of trying to make sense of the mysteries of life.